Well, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to start this meeting. Welcome, everyone. And as I said, happy Valentine's Day. We are honored to have Sarah Whitford with us. She is from a family that has roots going back to the earliest days of Craven County. And she has been a lifelong lover of family history and local history, and is very much into genealogy. She founded the website East Carolina Roots and the DNA project with FamilyTree DNA. And she is got a lot of information about the new technologies out there, and she is going to share that with us. But in addition to all of that, she is an author of a best-selling young adult historical fiction of the Adam Fletcher Adventure series and has several YouTube channels. So without further ado, I'm going to let Sarah start her program.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm really honored to be able to speak to the Craven County Genealogical Society. And first of all, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So my roots really are in Craven County. It would take me all night to go through all my family lines. But they're really in Craven County all the way back to the earliest days. And before that, they were in Bath, and some up around Chowan County. But it's been Craven, Pitt, and Beaufort County, and Lenoir, and Jones. But Craven's been in the heart of everything. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is actually something that I'm hoping some of you may already be really knowledgeable about, all the DNA tools that are available, how to best use them, the best tests to take, the best way to evaluate those tests to get answers about your genealogy and to solve mysteries. But not everyone does know. And I see evidence of that every time I check my Ancestry DNA and I see the kinds of things people are adding to their trees. So I am going to do a screen share of a little presentation that I put together. And then after I talk about the DNA stuff, I'm going to quickly give you some tips on finding what you're looking for at FamilySearch. FamilySearch.org. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen right now. I have a program that says Solve Family Tree Mysteries with the Right DNA Tools. So I want to talk about which tests are available and what questions do they answer. But I also want to talk about who you should get tested depending on the answers that you seek, because all of these things are relevant. And then I'll be talking about the tools that you can use once you have DNA tests to be able to really maximize your use of them. So first of all, and I'm going to go through some of these things kind of quickly because I'm going to take a little longer on some of the slides. So for testing options, we have FamilyTree DNA. They've been around the longest. My dad got our family testing the FamilyTree DNA way back in the shortly after 2000. Actually, it was originally the National Geographic Genographic Project, I think is what it was called. But then those DNA results were able to be transferred over to FamilyTree DNA. And so that was what we had. And that was just at that particular time doing the maternal and paternal lines. And I'm going to talk some more about that a little bit later. Then there's Ancestry, which a lot of you might have tested with. MyHeritage is another one. And 23andMe. Those are the major testing companies. There are a lot of different testing companies out there, but those are the main ones that people are using. Now, as far as the available tests, we have Y-DNA tests, mtDNA tests, and autosomal DNA tests. So I'm going to go into each of those a little bit and talk about what they're for and what you can do with them. So the Y-DNA test is going to test your direct paternal line. Only males can take a Y-DNA test. This is not an option for females. And also, this is useful for figuring out deep paternal ancestry. So this is particularly useful if you're trying to figure out, let's say I'm from the Whitford family, right? So my dad's a Whitford, and there are other Whitfords in the United States of America. And of course, there are some Whitfords in other parts of the world too, but it's not like it's the most common surname in the world. But if we tested and other Whitfords tested, we would presumably want to know, are we all originating from the same Whitford far back? Or might there be different branches? And some of them are completely different Y-DNA groups. So Y-DNA can be helpful for that sort of thing. And I actually have an example I'll show of that a little bit later. Y-DNA, as David mentioned earlier, can yield surprises. That's where you have those non-paternal events. You know, someone turns out to be not the last name that you expect. There was somebody who was a father who wasn't married to the mother, so the last name didn't come down the line. So that's a very real possibility. This is a chart showing what Y-DNA results look like when your DNA is in a Y-DNA kit. And so one of the surprises that we had in our family was my mother is a Morris. That's her maiden name. Morris is from the Vanceboro area. And there are several Morris families in Craven County, and not all of them are related. A lot of them are. But we had heard a family, I guess you could say, rumor that had been passed down the line that we weren't really Morrises, that we were Ledbetters. Well, the best way to find this out was to get some Y-DNA testing done. So we had my grandfather tested. He just passed away back in October, but way back in like 2007, 2008, I got his Y-DNA tested. And what do you know? The results that started coming back were showing lots of Ledbetters. So here we have all of a sudden validation of this family rumor that had been passed down, which is that we aren't really Morrises, we're Ledbetters. Well, we're Morrises, but you know, as far as that Y-DNA, there was an event in there somewhere where there was a Ledbetter. We were ultimately able to figure out who the most likely candidate was for his father. And that came from both Y-DNA testing as well as another type of testing, which I'll talk about shortly. Another example of using Y-DNA testing that can reveal interesting surprises is we had in our Whitford family book, there was a Whitford family book, and some of you may have these family books that were put together back in the 60s or 70s or whatever. Some of them were done way earlier than that. And God bless the genealogists who put these books together using the sources that they had at the time, which was going to courthouses, going to Register of Deeds offices, you know, doing the whole paper trail, traveling to different counties or different states or even different countries to try to get answers. And with our Whitford family, there was a book that was done like that back in the 70s. And in that book, there was some history written at the beginning where it was speculating about the origins of the Whitfords. And it was suggesting that our Whitfords came from Scotland. But this actually doesn't line up with the fact that there was actually a handwritten note by John Dalton Whitford, who was a Civil War. He was famous in the Civil War, but he wrote down a note that his paternal ancestor was from England. Well, this chart here showing some of the matches ends up telling a very interesting story. And I know these names mean nothing to you, but I want to explain to you what's happening here. So these are my dad's Y-DNA results as far as who his matches are. The very top match is Neil Whitford, who was his first cousin. Then there's Charles Pettyjohn Whitford, who comes from some Whitfords that moved west. And then there's Gary Ray Whitford, who came from Whitfords who went west. These are from the same Craven County Whitfords. We know exactly the line that branched off that these men come from. The very next match is P.L. Odgers. Comes from England. I've contacted this person, and they're from Cornwall. Well, in Cornwall, in a village in Cornwall where this person is from, there was a large family of Whitfords going way back into the early 1600s, into the 1500s, and there's some connections between those Cornwall Whitfords and some also, I think, that were in Wales. Well, further down we see there's a Steve Whitford. This tells us that we've been Whitfords at least going back to the 1600s, because this Steve Whitford descends from Pascoe Whitford from Rhode Island. And Pascoe Whitford, Pascoe is a very Cornish last name. That's just a big name in Cornwall. So that also supports the idea that our Whitfords are originally from Cornwall. But that's surprising because we have a lot of family members who have long thought we were from Scotland, but the DNA doesn't seem to bear that out. I'm not ready to stake my, name and reputation on the fact we're definitely from Cornwall, but Y-DNA can certainly cause us to get more information and come up with more educated guesses than just sort of rumor that's been passed down through the generations. Now, your mtDNA is mitochondrial DNA, so this only tests your direct maternal line. There are no other options for what mtDNA tests. Males and females can both test mtDNA, and the reason for that is females have XX chromosomes and males have XY chromosomes, and that's just the way that it is. So both have an X chromosome, but females do not have Y chromosomes, so females cannot do Y DNA testing, but males can do both kinds. So then often the thing about mtDNA is, which stands for mitochondrial DNA, the thing about it is often your most recent common ancestor in your matches is going to be so far back, it's often going to be outside of the genealogical time frame. So, while you're looking at your Y DNA results, you might find men that you descend from within the last, say, 100, 200 years or something like that. When you do the mitochondrial DNA tests, a lot of times it's going to tell you tons and tons and tons of women that also have women and men who have a female ancestor that might be way back. It might be in recent times, but to actually get back to the shared ancestor is nearly impossible unless you happen to know the names of one of the people that is an ancestor of someone who's tested. So in other words, mtDNA is interesting for finding out your deep maternal origins, to know what the haplogroup is, as far as like what part of the world did they come from, but it's not going to do a lot to help you actually solve mysteries and fill in blanks on your family tree. Now, this one is the really super exciting one to me, autosomal DNA. When they came out with this, man, I got everybody tested. I've had my grandmother and my grandfather tested for the Y and mtDNA. And then also, I've got great aunts tested on both sides. I've tried to get as many older relatives tested as possible. And that's one of the things that's super important is with the DNA testing, you want to get your oldest relatives to test, because when those people are gone, they're taking their DNA with them. And generations that are younger than that are not going to have as much DNA that connects back to ancestors that you might want to solve in your family tree. So with the autosomal DNA, it tests DNA inherited from both parents. The helpful results can go out to about the 5th great grandparent level. Once you get out past that, you start getting into really small amounts of what are called centimorgans, which are like little segments of DNA that would be indicating where you share matches. It's especially helpful for adoptees, as well as people who are trying to solve 2nd to like 4th cousin mysteries. It's very helpful for those cases. However, and unfortunately, a lot of people have done this. They've done the autosomal DNA testing because they want their ethnicity results. And this is a huge problem, and I'm going to tell you why. This is the number of generations in each generation to over 1 million, and it doesn't take you long to get there, okay? Already, by the time you have gotten to your 5th great grandparents, if you take each one of your 5th great grandparents, each of them represents less than 1% of your DNA because you have 128 5th great grandparents. So I have ancestors that in the 1790 and 1800 census were listed as other free in Beaufort County. They were Black, or they were mixed race, and that's way far back. So my grandmother and her sister have that Nigerian DNA reflected in their ethnicity. But for instance, if I were relying on my DNA, it wouldn't tell me anything. I wouldn't have known that. If I hadn't seen it on the census records, I wouldn't know it because my DNA doesn't show that because it's less than 1% for me. My mom has it. My brother has it. He happened to pick up that DNA. I just didn't pick it up. But another thing is a lot of people wanted to find out, and I was in this boat because I was really interested in this when I was in my 20s. I was super fascinated with this, is the Indian ancestry. In Eastern North Carolina, there are a ton of people who will talk about having, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother was part Indian. You know what I mean? Nobody knows what the tribe is because nobody talks about the tribes in Eastern North Carolina. I happen to know a lot about this. I've done a ton of research about it. In fact, I have another website called coastalcarolinaindians.com where you'll find a whole lot about Indian families from Eastern North Carolina. But the issue is the same. If you have ancestry that comes from any sort of indigenous individuals from way back then, it's going to probably be so far back that you're in the less than 1% range, which means it's not going to show up in your ethnicity reports. And a perfect example of this for me is this. I cannot guarantee that Roger Squires was indigenous. However, I highly suspect that he was because of oral history on the family line from which he comes, and also the fact that I know that the Mattamuskeet Indian Reservation, which was in Hyde County, existed after the Tuscarora War, which ended in 1715. And so after the Tuscarora War, there were a lot of remnant Indians that you would say that ended up moving to a reservation in Hyde County called the Mattamuskeet Indian Reservation. And they lived there, and there were also English people who lived on the reservation. It was all kinds of people, and they were mixing and whatnot. Well, there's a whole series of documents that have been published online, which has all the deeds related to the land for this reservation, including when this land was being sold off. Well, the first deeds being sold off from this reservation happened around 1739, which just so happens to be the very year my ancestor, Roger Squires, appears over in Beaufort County. The reason why it matters that his name was Roger Squires is the Squires family was sort of the lead family of the Mattamuskeet. The main chief of the Mattamuskeet was King John Squires. That was what he was called. And in all of the deeds on the Mattamuskeet Reservation, it's so-and-so Squires, Jonas Squires, it's a whole bunch of different Charles Squires, these different Squires. So I suspect that Roger Squires came from that reservation. He was probably already mixed when he left the reservation and came across the Pamlico River. And so this is so far back. And even though I come from Roger Squires about 5 different times through different ancestors, it's still going to be not enough to show up in my DNA. Now, 23andMe does show that I have like a little over 0.5% of indigenous DNA, but that's not going to show up on anything else. Not to mention Ancestry and FamilyTree DNA and 23andMe all have different amounts of other DNA for me in the larger quantity. Some say that I'm like 60% Irish. Some say that I'm broadly Northwestern European, and so that they'll give all different results. So if you got your autosomal test for the ethnicity, you're missing out on what is most valuable about it, which is getting answers about your ancestry. And if you're in a genealogy society like this, that's probably what you're mostly interested in anyway. You're mostly interested in finding out who your people are. So a lot of people wonder if you tested at one company, but let's say you have a lot of matches that tested at the other companies, do you actually have to go get tested at all the other companies that are out there? And the answer to that is no. It can be helpful to have tests at different companies. You can have tests at Ancestry and actually download your data and upload it for free to FamilyTree DNA. And you can also upload it for free to MyHeritage, which is a really cool thing to be able to do just to make sure that you have that in that database. But one thing that a lot of people don't know about is GEDmatch. GEDmatch has a lot of free tools that you can use. And if you have, let's say you have a DNA kit with FamilyTree DNA, but let's say you have some cousins who have tested with Ancestry, and let's say somebody else has tested with 23andMe. Well, all of those different DNA results can be downloaded by the different people who took those tests, and then they can be uploaded into GEDmatch, and it lets you list, in my case, I have a whole lot of kits that I manage for different family members. So this right here is the list of the kits that I manage at GEDmatch. I have my grandmother, my grandfather, my dad, different cousins. I have one for my mom on here, but I took her down because I don't need her since I have both of her parents. And then in addition, you can link kits that you have to a family tree. So you can upload a GEDCOM. I'm assuming if you're in a genealogy society, you probably know what a GEDCOM is, because that's the data that comes from your family tree software or from Ancestry. So you can upload a GEDCOM to GEDmatch, and then link people that you have kits for to the tree. So that way, when people are searching to see if they match you or if you come up as a match in the results, it'll also show them where, what your pedigree is, where you might be matching with them. Okay. All right. So, and if somebody else in your family has it, like a cousin has it, they can upload theirs and you can share your GEDCOM with them, and then they can upload it and link to that one. But this is what I want to talk about. They have free tools and then they have paid tools, and I'm going to go over both. The free tools will let you see one-to-many. And what that means is if I click on any of these kit numbers here, it's going to bring up a big, long list of everyone who she matches, my grandmother. And then it'll tell me if those people have a family tree posted to GEDmatch, which then lets me see, oh, okay, well, this name is interesting. I want to see who this person descends from. So then I can see if there is any, names that I recognize in the family tree. But then if you want to see the shared matches, which if you have used Ancestry or if you've used FamilyTree DNA or 23andMe, you can see what your shared matches are between you and another person. That would be this tool here called People Who Match Both or One of Two Kits. So this is where you would put in like 2 different kit numbers, and it will run who the shared matches are between you. All right, another super duper cool tool is the one-to-one autosomal DNA comparison. If you have FamilyTree DNA, you have an advantage over Ancestry in that FamilyTree DNA will actually let you look at the segments and the chromosomes where you share DNA with one of your matches. This tool here will let you copy that segment data and paste it in, and then see who else might be matching you on that chromosome. Or like in this one right here, the one-to-one autosomal DNA comparison will actually take people in GEDmatch and compare them. So there's also the ectDNA comparison, which is only looking at the X chromosome, which comes from different women and maternal lines throughout your tree, not just your mother, but there are other women in your tree from whom you inherit X chromosomes. I'm going to put all of this together in a handout that I'll hopefully pass on, that David or Nancy can send out to all of you later, because I know this is like a fire hose. It's so much information. But then they also have some paid tools I want to talk about. So the paid tools would be what they call tier 1. And the paid tools at GEDmatch are $10 a month if you go ahead and have it on automatic renewal. Otherwise, I think it's $15 a month. But one of the really cool tools that they have is called segment search. And what a segment search is if you know from another tool that I'm going to talk about shortly, and I'm going to jump down to it real quick because otherwise you won't know what I'm talking about. This is a DNA painter chromosome map. And I'm going to come back to this in a minute. But I have mapped out matches on my grandfather's DNA. And every single one of these different little colored lines represents some of his DNA matches. I haven't even begun. I mean, I've just got a few matches on here. But I've been able to determine which ones are supposed to be on the paternal line and which are on the maternal line. And when you have that tier 1 tool over here of a segment search, if you know you match someone on a certain segment, and you know you match other people on that segment to an ancestor who's a brick wall ancestor for you, but let's say somebody else shows up on that segment and you're trying to figure out, I wonder where we're matching. Like, I wonder who the ancestor is. This is a really useful tool. This will actually let you just search on a particular segment, on a particular chromosome, to see everyone who matches you on that segment. That is super, super helpful. Okay. And then there are like really advanced tools like phasing and triangulation and auto segments. Some of these produce results that create a zip file that you will download onto your computer and then lets you see like clusters and things like that. That's this right here. The clusters with the auto tree will take all of your matches per whatever specifications you give, and it's going to generate a zip file for you to download. And when you look at that, it's going to have all the matches you have in little clusters, suggesting what I see Sandy, let me admit her, suggesting what shared ancestor you have on that particular cluster, So when you see a group of people that you match with and you're like, what do all these people have in common? Well, all these people must be related under the same shared ancestor. And so that the auto tree, if they actually have a GEDCOM accompanying it, where there are similar last names, it can help you identify who that would be. The finding common ancestors or the most recent common ancestors from DNA matches is super cool, but you need to have your GEDCOM uploaded and your matches have to have their GEDCOMs uploaded. What it does is it'll take your DNA results from your kit on GEDmatch. And if you have a GEDCOM uploaded with with all your ancestors named in it, it sort of functions like Ancestry's, where it tells you who your shared ancestor is. If you have DNA on Ancestry and it's detected that you have a shared ancestor, it will tell you who your shared ancestors most likely are based on that particular tool. All right, let me see where I am. Okay, so as I mentioned, tier 1 is $10 a month for an automatically renewing subscription. Also, it will let you upload an unlimited number of kits. And I mean, when I first did mine, they let you upload as many as you wanted already. It's only been in recent years that they've started limiting the number of kits. But if you don't have a paid subscription, I think you can only upload 5. But there's still a ton of tools for you, even if you just have a free subscription. So don't feel like you have to have a paid subscription there. Another site of tools that people don't know about is DNA Painter, DNApainter.com. Now, DNApainter.com has some really super duper useful things. They have a paid subscription tier as well, and which lets you create a lot more chromosome maps. It lets you do a lot. It lets you just do more of what they have and save more in their system from some of the tools that they have. So I showed you already this map right here, which is a chromosome map. And this really is, I can't tell you how helpful this is. And when I'm done with this whole little slideshow, which is coming to a close in just a few slides, I'll be happy to take you into it and actually show you what this looks like when you expand out some of these matches. Then they have the shared CM tool. So if you're on Ancestry or you're on FamilyTree DNA or any of those sites, and it shows you what your shared CM is, that's the shared centimorgans. That's like the total number of shared segments of DNA that you match with someone. If you put those numbers into this calculator, it will give you all of the possible relationships that you can have based on the amount of shared DNA. But it'll also tell you what the greatest probability is. Now, with this one right here, I don't have it pulling up the most likely, but it will give you that result. But right now I just had put in 33 and it shows them highlighted, but it'll also show you a little chart and tell you the most likely answer is these different relationships. Your next most likely would be these relationships, and it'll tell you. All right, then they have a what are the odds, which is often referred to as WATO. This is super good for people who were adopted because they can use this if they are in whether it's Ancestry or FamilyTree DNA or whatever. And let's say you have noticed, let's say an adoptee has noticed that there are a whole bunch of different people that they match who all come from the same great-grandparents. And so then that person's like, all these people come from that same couple. So I probably also come from that same couple, but I don't really know how I fit in. So something like this can help with that. But it also can help if you know that you do have a shared set of ancestors with someone, but you don't know which line they come down from. It can help you pick that out as well. And rather than this is the kind of thing that you can take an hour just to talk about this. I will make sure when I put that handout together that I put links to a couple of really good YouTube videos that explain how to use this as well as the chromosome map tool. Okay. And so then the next thing that I wanted to get into was sort of the bonus content about accessing the deep records on FamilySearch. But I feel like it might be a good idea for me to go into DNA Painter or GEDmatch and do like some demonstrations of some of those tools. Would anybody be interested in that? Okay. All right, so let me go to my browser and let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to start sharing my browser. So let me quickly go to DNA Painter. Is everyone able to see my browser right now? I just want to make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Okay. All right, so I'm going to come here to chromosome maps. Now, I've done chromosome maps for several different people for whom I manage kits or to whom I have access to their kits. I'm going to pull up my grandmother really quick. So here's hers. And you'll see what I've done over here is from where I had started copying and pasting her match data in on DNA Painter, it lets me identify, well, who's the shared ancestor with that person. So this is how you end up with this kind of information. If I come to FamilyTree DNA, I'm assuming you can still see everything that's in my browser here.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so if I come here and I log in, this is for my grandmother, Beatrice Morris, who, thank the Lord, is still living. And I'm going to come to her Family Finder matches. And so Family Finder, for those of you who don't use FamilyTree DNA, if you use Ancestry, the Family Finder results are the same kind of results you get with the Ancestry DNA test. So her very top match is T. Morris, which is my mother, Teresa. And then there's Letha Cox, which is her sister, who has passed away. Then there's me. And then there is Hope Armstrong, who is Letha's granddaughter. And then here is one of my grandmother's first cousins. And then here's another cousin. This is a first cousin once removed. So what I can actually do is, and I want to do this with someone who is a little further out. So Mike Morris, this is John Michael Morris. We call him Mike. He's somebody who has partnered with me a lot on figuring out our Morris line actually being Ledbetters. So if I click on him right here, and then I do compare relationships between her and him, it's going to show the exact chromosomes and segments where she matches DNA with him. If some of you have used FamilyTree DNA before, you've already seen this, but you might not have even realized what you can do with this information. Sadly, Ancestry won't let you access this data. They don't provide it to you. But if you have an Ancestry DNA test, don't fret, because you can still download your data from Ancestry. And if you upload it to GEDmatch and use one of those tier 1 tools that I was talking about, you can do the same thing at GEDmatch. Okay. So this shows the exact places where my grandmother matches Mike Morris. And so this is just a bunch of colors. And, you're like, how in the world are you going to get that over into that chromosome map? Well, if you come here to the detailed segment data, all I have to do is I have a Mac. So I do Command A and then copy. Yes, copy everything. If you're on a Windows computer, it will be Control A just to do the copy everything. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and I can say, I'm going to paint a new match. Actually, you know what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to do a brand new map. And that way, let's see, that way it'll be totally clean and you can, and I'm going to call it B example. And then I'm going to say female. Okay. All right. So if I want to paint a new match, I'm going to say paint a new match. And I'm just literally just going to paste every single thing that I copied just now. Yes, even with all that other stuff about, all this other text that has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter. This is so smart. It will strip all of that out. I'll say save match now. It automatically knows that the name of the person is John Michael Morris. And then it's going to say, well, if you know how you're connected, you can label these segments of the ancestor you got them from. Well, B and Mike have a couple of different shared ancestors. They have shared ancestors on the Morris line, but they also have them with the Holmes line, which is that free people of color line that I mentioned earlier. So, but I'm just going to say, I think the closest line that they match to is probably, I'm going to say Laban Morris and Kitty Williams. I might be wrong. It might be John Holmes, but it doesn't matter. For this example, it'll be fine. And I'm going to say maternal because I know that they're matching on her maternal side. Okay. And so then at that point, I'm just going to come down here and click save. So you see it put his matches right here. So these are the ones that she shares with Mike. So I'm going to just grab Earl's numbers and paste him in. And I know these are on Laban. All right, and then I'm going to grab the ones for John Charles. And in the case of John Charles and my grandmother, I think their more recent ancestor is, it might be the same, but they also come from the Holmes. And so that's another one. So I'm just, for the sake of the different color, I'm going to save that as all right. And I'm going to say maternal. That's also a maternal one. So now as I start looking, I can see, where people are matching for, I can see if they're matching for Laban Morris based on what's in this group over here. So if I want to just see the John Holmes and Celia Averett matches, I'll be able to see those here. And then the Laban Morris ones, I'll be able to see here with the dark blue. And so some of them are Earl Smith, and some of them, which is just that one and that one, and some are John Michael Morris. And then if I wanted to, I would be able to come back in here, and here's somebody else that I know is a closer cousin that comes from them. I'm going to do a compare just so you'll be able to see, because I want to see some overlap. Let's see. All right. And this is, see, it says there's two that it overlaps with. It overlaps with John Holmes and it overlaps with Laban Morris. And that's correct because this person does match on both of those lines. But for now, I'm actually going to do a different group. I'm going to say Morris and Holmes, because this is one where I know it's both of them, but I do know it's also on the maternal line. And so then, and let me make that a little bit darker color because that's kind of hard to see. And then, all right. So now that makes that a little darker. So now you start seeing how you'll have, and see how there's some overlap there. It almost looks like one long piece with this one. But all these are on the maternal side. But I have a paternal cousin of my grandmother, which is Earlene Smith. So I'm going to show you what that looks like when it goes on the paternal line. And whenever you know somebody, how they match with you, and you can paste that data into DNA Painter, you want to indicate if it's paternal or maternal, because otherwise it's just going to show it across both. And so in this case, it would try to say it's the same on the maternal, but I know she's a paternal cousin. So, and I know the shared ancestors are my grandmother's grandparents, Edward Cox. And this is not the Cox from Pitt County. This is the Cox from Lenoir County. I don't know if they're connected to the Pitt County ones. I haven't been able to get back that far yet. Edward Cox and Ethel. No, not Edward Cox. I'm sorry, Thomas Cox and Nanny Wood. Okay. All right, and this is paternal line. All right, so you see, this is her first cousin. So that's a lot of DNA, but it's all on the paternal line. And some of it will look like it would overlap with these other matches I've already put in, but they're on the maternal line. So for every chromosome you have a paternal side and a maternal side. And your matches are going to need to be divided up both ways. And if you've used Ancestry or FamilyTree DNA, I think 23andMe might do it too, but they'll separate things out by maternal or paternal. So anyway, you can see how this could be a powerful tool, because then if you started seeing matches, like matches in your FamilyTree DNA or something like that, and you're not sure where they match you'll copy where they share segments with you. And if you paste it in on DNA Painter, you could be like, they line up on this segment. And depending on if it's the maternal or paternal line, it might be this ancestor, or it might be this ancestor over here. So that'll help you narrow your focus a little bit more about what you're looking at in the shared tree. I've recently been able to finally break through and figure out who some of these people are in my matches that I've not known who they were or how they would match. They were really close. They were coming up as pretty close matches, but I was never able to figure it out until recently. And And that was actually from using another tool. I was using that Watto tool that I told you about for a fellow who wasn't sure. He had a non-paternal event in his tree. And so I was able to help him figure out what that goes back to for his great-grandfather. Anyway, this is a lot of information. I want to let people ask questions if they have any.
I do have a question, Sarah.
Okay, yeah.
This is Lita.
Okay.
So on my family DNA, family tree DNA, I can't get the boxes where you click on it. Is that I'm just in the what is this box? The Y DNA matches.
Hey,
Is that where you're in?
The Y DNA matches are paternal line only. Those are the ones I was talking about only. It's only paternal line. So that's not going to, the DNA painter, this chromosome painter is not for that. The Y DNA matches is only going to look at a man and his father and his father's father and that line going straight back.
So I can't do the DNA painter with that then?
No, but if you have any autosomal results, you can. And the autosomal results are pretty cheap at a lot of the companies now as it goes. You know what I mean?
You said I can upload from Ancestry.
If you have autosomal DNA, if you've done an Ancestry DNA test, have you done one? Okay, so let me show you what to do.
It shows both of my sides.
So I'm going to come onto Ancestry and I'll show you what you would do. So here's my DNA on Ancestry. And if I come to my settings, all right, it's going to give me, might take me a second. Oh, here we go. Down here at the bottom, it says download DNA data. So I can download DNA data for my test. If I manage other kits, which I do, I manage a lot of kits on Ancestry, I would be able to download those. And I have. I've downloaded some of those kits and uploaded them to GEDmatch. So if I download this data, and you have to acknowledge that you understand the risk that once you have it, they're not protecting it anymore. You have to, be careful with it. So then you would download it. And then what you would do is you would come over to GEDmatch, which I'll log into. And again, you can upload kits for free on GEDmatch. You can use the tools for free on GEDmatch, up to 5 kits. This free set of tools is for anyone. It's totally free for these tools. But then when you get into the tier 1 tools where it's the specific segment search, okay, but the 1-to-1 autosomal comparison, if you take your Ancestry results and you use this 1-to-1 autosomal comparison, that's what you want. So for instance, this is my grandmother and this is my grandfather. They are like 6th cousins, right? I know this because they were 5th cousins, something like that. They both come from Laban Morris, who, if anyone goes to East Carolina roots, that has been like my #1 brick wall ancestor for so long. And of course, it's because his father was a Ledbetter, and we don't know who his mother was because we found out he had a name change in 1810. He wasn't even a Morris to start out with. That's another story. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to show you how that 1-to-1 autosomal DNA comparison works. So this is my grandmother's kit, but then I'm going to compare her to my grandfather. So his is T3888822. All right, so I'm pasting her kit in because it's more complicated. And then I'm going to say T3888822. And I don't care about graphics and positions. I'm just going to grab position because that's just going to tell me the specific numbers and segments and stuff. I'm leaving everything else at default right now. And then I'm just going to hit compare. This is going to give me that same data I would have gotten over on FamilyTree DNA. In this case, this is the only place where they match. And I can still do copy A, like, Command A or Control A, and I can still come back over here. But then let's see what happens. If I do this and I say save match now, all right, AD, all right. And then it says there's a group where there's overlapping segments. So I could say Morris Holmes. Well, I'll pick that one. It's really not Holmes, it's Morris, but that tells me that other kit, it's hard when you have endogamy. If you don't know what endogamy is, that's what we have in Craven County and Pitt County and Beaufort County and Lenore. We have all these families that have intermarried so many times that you come from some of the same ancestors multiple times. And some of the people you're cousins with come from several of your ancestors. So you're not sure where the segments are overlapping. But in any case, that segment 13, I put AD right here. That was my grandfather. So this is where he matches my grandmother. But that tells me this particular segment right here is specifically for Laban Morris and Kitty Williams because that's the only place where they match. And I happen to know that. So that means if I'm looking at things that are at that far end of her chromosome 13, I'm specifically looking at that couple. Of course, that could be anybody behind that couple, either Laban's parents or Kitty's parents. But I do know that anything down at that far end of chromosome 13 for her is that ancestral pair. I know that.
Sarah.
Yeah.
For Lita's case, the Y-DNA, she can download the Y-DNA and upload that to GEDmatch, correct? And compare it to the other Y-DNA on GEDmatch.
That's a fantastic question, David. I've never done it, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's the main thing that I've always done was, because back in the day, that's basically all we had. But I thought they had you could compare the Y. I could be wrong. I could be off on it, but or is GEDmatch only? Because I thought I uploaded both my Y-DNA and my autosomal to GEDmatch.
I really don't know, to be honest with you. I don't see any specific tools for that. I don't know if you remember this, but like in the early days with FamilyTree DNA, when all they had was the Y-DNA and the mtDNA, right, they would also encourage you to upload your results to like Y-match or mtMatch or something like that, which was not this same site. It was a different thing, but that was similar to this in that it was a broader database of. That's right. There was that. So maybe that's where. But I could be. There might be, and if you find out, I hope you'll let me know because that. Okay, it may have been what you're talking because that Y site that you were talking about. That's where people had uploaded all their GEDcoms, and it had all their family trees, and then they gave us like 2 months saying that we're going away. Because they got caught in that whole international privacy issue. Oh yeah. And that's the reason they just decided to shut down. But they had a lot. So I think you're right. That was the Y-DNA site, but okay. Yeah. And as far as I know, at this time, I'm thinking the only company where you can do a dedicated Y-DNA test or mtDNA test is FamilyTree DNA. Right. But I was thinking there was something, and maybe it was that other site that I uploaded my Y-DNA to because that's how I found something. I know which one you're talking about because I used that one too, but that's not this one. That's gone away. Okay. Yeah. All right. So GEDmatch is autosomal only as far as we know? As far as I know, yes. I could spend all night going over the tools here. One thing I wanted to mention while I'm looking at this, you see all these where it says police and then over it. When you upload DNA to a site like this, and it's the same thing with several of them now, you can tell them, no, I don't want you using these kits for, police work. Like if some of you might be like, well, that's awful. Why wouldn't you let the DNA be used for, for people to try to solve crimes and stuff like that? And it's just because I'm a big believer in the Fourth Amendment, and that's why. And so, but you totally can. If you have a DNA kit, you can make it so that it's available for the police or the FBI or anybody to use to search their database for anything, anytime. But you can block it out. And in fact, if you didn't know, in FamilyTree DNA, you can go into the settings and actually deactivate the ability to have the DNA kit used for those kinds of searches for solving crimes. It's wonderful to be able to solve crimes, but I feel like there's so many people out there who have their DNA already out there. It's, that I don't feel like they necessarily I don't feel like they need ours. They're going to find it because there's so many people who have kits. And I honestly think that they might be checking it anyway, even when people don't give permission, because they can just upload a kit and search, and we wouldn't know any different. So, yeah, but does anybody else have any questions that I can answer or go over anything? Because I'm happy to dig into any of this to show you any of this.
It's great because of if you start this off in your young generation, but suppose you don't have any grandparents or aunts or uncles on either side of the family, because when you're in your 90s, you don't have those people to get your tests from. What chance do you have of being able to make sure of your relatives that you find on FamilySearch or whatever, that they're actually your relatives?
It's such a good question. And, you know, that's one thing that's so unfortunate, because a lot of people, I especially think about people whose families have moved across the country. You know, if for somebody like me, it's easy because my family has not been very adventurous. I think they came across the ocean once and then that was it. And they said no more. And they haven't gone anywhere since. But for families that have moved away and the families have been disconnected by many states for generations, you know, once they might not take an interest in genealogy until they're, you know, grown. Maybe they even have grandkids, and then all of a sudden they take an interest in it. But by then maybe their parents have passed away. And like you say, aunts and uncles might have passed away. The best thing that they're going to have at that point is their own DNA. So they just need to take the test themselves and upload it. And they can go ahead and do, I don't really recommend people do the mitochondrial DNA test, because I just like, if somebody is maybe an adoptee and they just really want to do that. I mean, I did it because I was just curious as to what my haplogroup was as a woman, you know, and having inherited that from my mother and her mother. So it's kind of neat for that. But beyond that, it's not particularly useful. But the Y-DNA test for men can be very helpful, regardless of, you know, whether you're, you know, young and you don't have any older male relatives. At the very least, you know what your DNA is. And if you're coming up with any other matches with your last name, then that will help you out. But the autosomal test, anybody can do that. And I think anybody should do it, because having sort of this DNA in these databases for genealogical purposes, you know, will ultimately, the more people who have it, the better it is. And I was watching a video on YouTube the other day where they said they actually think we're kind of at the point now where most people who are going to do it have done it. So there's not going to be this huge increase in results in DNA tests. It's just going to be kind of steady going forward, because that sort of huge explosion's already happened. But you know, if enough of us test, and any older people test, and our stuff is in there, that's going to help younger people who come up and test to at least link to something that's just maybe a couple of generations away. You know I've paid for tests for a lot of older relatives because it was so important to me to get that into the system for whatever research that I can do now or in the future as they improve technology. You know, we don't know what they're going to come up with in years to come.
We really need people across the pond to test.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting, because, you know, the thing that's so hard with the autosomal DNA is, you know, as far as the usefulness of it, it's useful to be able to show up with cousins. But really, as the farther away we're getting from those generations that did come across a long time ago, it's almost getting to the point where it's, unless it's that Y-DNA test, that's where the Y-DNA test, it'll be helpful. But for the autosomal, probably not so much, because once you get down with DNA Painter, okay, if I come here and I go to that tool that's like the CM calculator, this is the tool that I showed in that one slide, where if you put in a number, and sometimes you'll have matches that'll come up that might be like, you might have a match that only has 10 centimorgans that you share with them. So this is the likelihood, is 62% is the greatest likelihood that it's going to be a sixth cousin once removed, fifth cousin, sixth cousin twice removed. You see there's a whole range here, all the way out to seventh cousin once removed, or eighth cousin or more distant. Well, seventh cousin once removed, I mean, that's your sixth great grandparents, and eighth cousin is your seventh great grandparents. Well, for a lot of us, that's when you start getting into that time frame when people might have come here in the early colonial era, you know. And so that's the across the pond thing. At that point, you're looking at like segments of DNA that are not even reliable, because I think they say once you get to 7 to like below 7, it might not even be a real shared ancestor. It might be just coincidence.
What are your thoughts about through lines on Ancestry?
Let's talk about that. I love to talk about that.
I think it was Kelly. She mentioned that in the chat. So,
yes, I want to talk about that. I'm all for it, y'all. just go ahead and be prepared. You might be offended. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I'm just going to be real, because I want people to understand you're not helping yourself or anybody if you're not getting this right. And a lot of you hopefully are getting this right. But if you know people that, you know, that they have family trees where they have definitely something wrong, please correct them and tell them. I've done family tree fact checks on my site about this kind of stuff, but I'm going to pull up my great aunt. This is my grandmother's sister who passed away. And in her through lines, this drives me nuts. I've done a family tree fact check about this, but people apparently haven't seen it. And so they keep putting the wrong thing. But for her second great grandparents, they have Lewis Cox and Celia Carmack, because people think that those are the parents of Eli Cox. Once upon a time, like 10 or 12 years ago, I thought that that's possibly the parents of Eli Cox, because there was a court item that mentioned Eli Cox in relation to some land that belonged to Lewis Cox. But I asked my brother about it. He's a judge now, but he was a lawyer. And I said, what does this mean? He said, oh, that doesn't mean anything having to do with a relationship. It just literally means there was a court case in which he was being basically evicted from that land. Well, that doesn't suggest a family relationship. And in fact, Lewis Cox, in his estate documents, it names his children. There are none that are named Eli. There is one named John, but Eli never went by the name John. He only ever went by the name Eli. Even especially around the time when Lewis died, which was 1854, Eli had already been married twice by then. So with through lines, I think some things can be really great about through lines because it can give you information. People might look in their through lines and they might see, for instance, they might see names or relationships that they're like, oh, I never heard of that person before. This is another one that's wrong. This is a woman from England who a lot of people for generations used to say was Laban Morris's mother, and that his father was a man from England. And it's wrong, because Laban Morris wasn't even a Morris. This Roland is most likely correct. That's the person who from DNA we've determined is most likely Laban's father. But there are others in here that I haven't even begun to dig into yet. I do know that this John Carmack and Mary Doherty is probably wrong, because that's just a repetition of the wrong information that's up here with the Celia Carmack and so on. But sometimes it can be a good starting place, because if it's a name you've never heard of, and if it's a line you've not researched, you might see it come up, and then you can try to look into it yourself. But don't just look at it, and just because somebody has a bunch of things saved to a person in their tree, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good match, because that's a big issue that I see. And one thing I wish Ancestry had was, I wish they had a way to actually say no, like you ignored these as recommendations, kind of like on your ancestry tree, it'll give you hints for who somebody's parents were. And you can say no, and then it won't keep suggesting that person. I wish it would do that for the through lines, but they don't let you.
One thing I found with through lines on my Turner line and we're back in the early 1800s, and I have descend from a Philip Turner, but then all of his brothers and sisters are named in a will, but then they disappear from Craven County. And it was through lines that I was able to find that they ended up in Texas before 1850. So it's like you say, and other people have said, it's not perfect,
right.
But where through lines is correct is that you and that person do share DNA.
Yeah.
It may not be the exact way Ancestry is saying it is.
Well, one hint about that, this is that you bring up a really good point, because one hint about that is this. Okay, so here's this Lewis Cox that I just told you, this is wrong, this is not correct. So if I click on this is a dead giveaway that this is not a good match. So when you have somebody where it's like, it says there are 63 matches, it's saying that there are some from this line and some from this line, this is supposed to be, first of all, this is the same name. This is like Eli J. Cox and this is Eli Cox. So this is obviously supposed to be the same person. It's just some have it as Eli Cox and some have it as Eli John Cox. So we're going to pretend this is the same person. But the only other person who even supposedly comes from Lewis Cox are these three matches. And you see the amount of shared centimorgans.
Way back.
9, 10, 10. These are 5th to 8th cousin levels, and yet that Lewis Cox is supposed to be is supposed to be her second great grandfather? No, the second great grandfather, according to this, should have, I'm going to get rid of this and we can look at it. A second great grandfather, according to this chart, let's find it. So that's going to be a third cousin match. On average, is going to have around 73 shared centimorgans. So that's a big help. Like if you look and you notice matches in your shared and your, you know, in your things here, if you come and you click on it and you look and see, well, are there other people from that supposed shared ancestor? If there's only like one other person, and in this case, there's really only one other person because this and this are really supposed to be the same person. So everybody is coming from Eli. This is the only unique person from that family. But this, it's only 9 or 10 or 10. That's way too low. That's way too low for somebody who's supposed to be a third cousin. So that's a good thing to do, is like if you actually have somebody that's coming up and it's saying this might be who it is. Well, even though it says there's a bunch of matches, look and see what the shared CMs are, and to see if it lines up for the fact that they might have multiple children and you're going back that many generations. Nobody just had one child back then. I mean, that was almost unheard of. And so to have that many, a great example is this one, Louisa Ann Watson. This is something that is speculative for me, which is why I put this picture for her that says speculative. I think that Nancy Watson, which was Eli Cox's wife, I think she was the illegitimate daughter of Louisa before Louisa married John Bright Phillips. Okay. But look how many matches that we have with her children. And this is the thing, is if I actually click on the full list and I look and see, you know, different ones that they came from, we're looking like 48 centimorgans, 114 centimorgans, 43 centimorgans. These are matches that are more in line. Yes, some of them might be low. 130 centimorgans. 20. This particular family was the one that was a giveaway for me. The Singler family, they have tests on FamilyTree DNA and this site, and they were always coming up as like the closest cousin for that Cox side of my grandmother's family. And it was like, this doesn't make sense. They're descending from the sister of the woman my grandfather married, but we didn't come from that particular wife. We came from the next wife. Why would we be coming? But then I ended up kind of solving that. And I've got an article about that on East Carolina Roots. But that's a good example of where I can look at the DNA and the shared centimorgans and see, okay, these make sense for the supposed relationship that's there. But some of the other ones don't, because there aren't other children in the family that we match to. And if we do, it's such a small amount, it doesn't line up for the level of grandparent it's supposed to be. Does that make sense? Okay.
You could do an hour on each one of these topics.
Yes.
I have a question, Sarah,
Yeah.
about this. So with my Cooper line, I'm trying to prove the paternity, you know, and the siblings of, I think it's my 4th great grandpa. And his siblings keep disappearing and then reappearing and then disappearing, or they're gone. I see them once and then they're gone, you know. So is it people messing around with their trees or something? Like, it showed I was a DNA match to these people. So where did they go?
You mean people in your matches disappear?
Yeah, so it would be like a 4th great grandparent. You click on that name, it goes to that person and all the kids, and it shows, you know, all the kids that are supposed to be there. And then I'll look the next day and one of them is gone.
Okay, so what's happening there then is there's a couple of things that could be happening. If you're clicking on ones that are that you haven't put in as a definite, are these ones that are definite matches for you, or they're still green for you, like they're suggested?
No, these are for real. Like, these are the ones that I have in my tree.
Okay, so then what it might be where somebody has speculated themselves that they might be, but you'll also
the mother keeps changing.
Yeah, you'll also notice though that Ancestry will try to sort out how somebody, so I know, for instance, I come from him, Jeremiah Heath. And so when you have these right here that are kind of green under him as children, those are the ones that are likely to go away. And the reason why is because Ancestry is doing a lot of guesswork from like this person who apparently doesn't even have a person in place as a parent. And Ancestry has gone ahead and said, well, we think that this person's mother must be this person. And so from other trees that are in our system, we know that this person's mother is this person. And so, but then as the person goes in and starts actually adding their own information, that might throw off what Ancestry has predicted. So it'll remove them. That's what's probably happening.
So if it's a dotted line, it's not for sure.
Yeah, if it's a dotted
You'd
line,
have to go in and make the tree for those people.
yeah, that's
Like
exactly,
you have to add them into your tree.
that's right. That's
No,
right.
these people don't have any green.
Okay. Well, in some cases, they might have thought that they were just like with me. Well, like I just talked about Louisa Watson. I have tentatively added her to my tree and I put that big picture for her profile that says speculative. I've explained in the notes on her profile, this is speculative. And I added her because I wanted to see what through lines was going to turn up as far as shared matches. Sometimes people do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they know for sure. They're guessing, you know what I mean? But then if they get better information or other information, they might remove the relationship, which will break that as,
Okay.
even
Audrey,
if it.
Audrey has a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Probably, to the subject that we're already on, because for myself, I'm kind of like I'm not an advanced family searcher or genealogist. I do a lot of research, and I mean like days and days on top of one another. And some of the information that I get, it appears that it's the right information because it seemed like the dates and the names and the places and everything kind of like match up to be an ancestor of mine. But then when I further do my research, like into like the wills and stuff like that, I find out that, hey, this date is not true, but I already added on my my tree.
Yeah.
So I have to go back to my tree and I need to correct what's on my tree. Now, my question is, when people copy from your tree, you have to make a note, like, hey, this date is wrong, but the note need to get to everybody who copied from my tree, or everybody's tree is just going to be thrown off. And then you're going to get a lot of these things in true line that says potential ancestors.
You are 100% right. You are so right. And that is exactly why I started using that speculative thing. Whenever I have anything that I don't know for sure is true, I always will put like speculative on that person, even if it's just something in the facts about them, because that way people know, look, I'm not 100% sure about everything with this person. And I have because I've been doing this since I'm 47. I've been doing this since I was really like in high school. And then I started Ancestry as soon as Ancestry came out. So I probably have some stuff in my tree that's probably wrong. You know what I mean? And so at some point, and fortunately, I know it's not going to be most likely in my direct line. It might be in some other lines I was researching. And I hate that. I hate thinking of that, but I've got like 18,000 people in my tree now, so it's hard for me to like go back and correct all that. But most people don't have trees that are that huge. But you bring up such a good point, because this is why I think it's a great practice when you are working with an ancestor and you're putting in possible children. I will put speculative on anybody that I'm trying to connect in relationships if I'm not sure about it. I'll put that little speculative. I'll give you an example of one where I've done that. It's with my Whitford line. It's with that Cornwall thing. And let me come over here. Let me get out of the DNA thing. But if I go to Thomas Whitford, all right. So if I come to him, I for a while had him connected to a family in Cornwall. Right now, I don't have him connected to them, but if I did, let me see.
Okay.
I think his name was there in Cornwall as well. That was this one. So this is the one, but see this whole family, if you look at this whole family, let me pull it up in the tree. Anybody in this family?
Sign.
Yeah, I made it. I just made that little graphic. But I mean, if you ever want to make a graphic like this, you can make graphics for free on Canva. Go to canva.com I just use the Instagram template, which is just a square template. And then you can just make it a nice bright color in the background and type whatever you want. Nowadays, I don't type as much. When I first made these, it says warning, research on this branch is partially speculation, proceed with caution. I don't say all that much anymore. Now it just says speculative. So when somebody goes to it, then they can see my notes on that person, but then at that point, that they don't have an excuse, because if they see speculative, but they just add it to their tree and they start copying it, that's,
Oh, no.
We have questions. I will have a question from Debbie.
Okay.
So I actually put in a speculative myself for my 2 times great grandfather Andrew Richardson's parents.
Uh-huh.
I just had a theory that it might be this guy named Valentine Richardson, which is a brother of Andrew Heiser that David was talking about. And he married a Laney Venetson or Venelson. I put that in as speculative, and lo and behold, I match a bunch of DNA with the wife, with Laney. So is that real? Now, all the lines, all of the through lines are wrong, because people have Valentine as a Van Valentine in Gibson County, and it's a different Valentine, and they're probably related, but it's a different one than Andrew.
So you're saying that, like, when you put in somebody as a speculative ancestor, you are matching one of his children?
I'm matching the wife's. Now, the Richardson is Valentine, but I'm matching the wife.
Okay.
Are
you okay? So what you want to look at is who are you matching the wife through? Like, is it what children? Because in through lines, it's always going to show all the children of a family that you might be matching to. If everybody is matching under the same person, like the same child, then it might not be very reliable. But if you match several of the children and it's an amount of DNA that makes sense based on that calculator that I showed you earlier,
right?
That's when you've got something.
But on through line, but if someone shows up on your through lines as a match, you are a DNA match, but you may not be through how they're saying it.
Exactly. Yep. Well,
because I've done the same thing, Debbie. I've done the same thing for, and I've also had like where I had 150 matches for the father and 2 matches for the mother. Several generations back. So that would tell me either the trees are really wrong, or there's something's not right in Hooterville. So
yeah.
What's weird is that I'm matching Laney, who is not a Richardson, she married one, through Richardson's. So,
but if she was the wife, then I guess people are thinking that was the mother. But that's why I'm saying it depends on who the child was. If everybody's matching through the same child, that's why you're seeing all those matches on Laney, but maybe not on the husband.
And that's where what I will do, I will just start taking each child and start researching them to prove or disprove that line. Because a lot of times, and that's what I like about, I wish FamilySearch is where it is now on their family tree like 20 years ago. But a lot of times I'll go there because the thing that frustrates me about ancestry trees is that, there are 17 different French family trees. That's all based on my research from the 90s when I didn't know as much as I know. And people have just clicked the little green thing and added it, so that's where I like FamilySearch, because I can go into the person and I can put on there, I can explain what I've done. And it's one place, because I gave up years ago of corresponding with people on Ancestry because they just, I find people on FamilySearch are much more responsive than on Ancestry a lot of times. But,
Elizabeth, I see you have a question.
Yes. I just this week assigned dot colors to all my cousins on Ancestry.
Uh-huh.
And I spent like a whole day doing it. I have just a ton of cousins, but afterwards I had leftover cousins that have no color. Now, the way I did it was different. I looked at like 5-7 videos of DNA people, and I went with this one person, your DNA guide, It's a noted woman who does
Oh, yeah, I
DNA
know who you're
instruction.
talking about.
And the way she does it was the only way that I could figure it out. I tried to do Blaine Bettinger because I know he'd be the authority,
Yeah,
but I couldn't understand. I didn't have first cousins, so I couldn't really do it. But I went with her method. But in the end, I had cousins that have no dots and they don't match. Now, the way your DNA guide tells you to match your cousins and give them a color, like you have there for Benjamin Wayne, all the colors of the ancestral couples. She says to go to your through lines. And this made sense to me. And look at the descendants with your DNA and do it that way, because then you know which branches you're trying to give a color to.
Okay, that makes sense. I did the dots when they first came out with this, and I haven't gone back and changed it because I manage a lot of kits, and especially I was focused in on this one particular thing on my maternal line, which is that Laban Morris line. And so anybody who had any connection that was helping me solve that, I was trying to group people, but Benjamin is somebody who I match on several different lines, but I know what you're talking about. You're talking about.
So my question is, as a DNA person, what do you do when you don't know? Like I see you have some that you haven't given colors to.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you just leave them that way? Or do you try to look at shared matches again?
I've gotten to the point where I'm not really even using those as much anymore. I used to use them a lot more than I do now, but now I just sort of know by sight who some people come from. Plus I use these notes, like, so this person I know we're related on this particular couple. And yes, I do have color assigned. Oh, I don't remove them. I don't want to remove them from that. I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, but the point is, I don't use that as much anymore because as new people have come in, and especially with the endogamy thing, that's where it's a huge problem. Because with somebody like Benjamin, there's so many lines we're related on, and it's all within the same family. There was this cluster of families on the border of like Craven and Beaufort County near Chalkawinity, with the Morrises and the Holmes and the Edwards and the Wiggins. And like, I'm not from the Wiggins, but like there's a bunch of these families that just intermarried so many different times. And I have a theory about that. I kind of suspect this because that Holmes family was the one that were other free in 1790 and 1800. So I have a feeling, and plus a lot of Laban's sons, some have said Laban's sons fought for the Union. And so I kind of have a feeling that these were families that tended to marry with each other because they knew each other, really well in a unique way. And others on the outside might not have been as inclined to marry them because they didn't want to deal with mixed race anything, which is stupid. But I mean, that's people used to do things like that. So, but in these cases where I have this many, this isn't helpful. Where I have these dots. Now, if it's somebody if it's a more distant line where I don't have all of that endogamy, then I'm more likely to actually code them with a color, because then it's actually helpful because I can be like, okay, well, I know this person is related to me on this particular Prescott ancestor back in the late 1700s or whatever, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's just kind of.
Yes, it's helpful to me to know that you don't lean solely on that. And
no, I don't.
I'm just trying to do what I can to break a brick wall on my dad's side.
Yeah.
And there's a case where there's my Jesse that was born in North Carolina. He shows up in Georgia where his children got married. So I feel that's him. It makes sense in the 1850s. And then I go back to Robeson, and there's a Jesse there on another census. My DNA relatives are claiming, and this is at the same time, these censuses. So he's in a house in Georgia with all these children and no wife. And then there's a Jesse, Britt, and Robeson. And I'm close to the people of the Robeson Facebook group. And they know their history on that group, like they know their families.
Oh yeah.
But what I don't understand is my relative that I know for a fact that I have photographs of and deep oral history of, his son. There's just a conflict there because in Robeson, where there's another person by that name, my DNA is showing up half sibling to these people. And so it does open the possibility, can someone be in two places on two censuses? And that's, but I'm related to these people. So I'm going to be calling them because they're on my through line descendants.
Well, I would check in that case, I would check the date on when that census was taken in the two locations. And the reason why I say that is because my Laban Morris appears twice on the 1850 census, and there's different people in his household depending on which instance it was. And I think it just had to do with who was there that day when the census taker came. Granted, that's both in Craven County. But in your case, if you check and you notice that the census was taken several months apart, maybe that was the time when the ancestor moved,
Yeah.
and left one and moved to the other.
I had nipped it and said it, and everybody said it can't be the same person. You have two different identities. But then I really started thinking about it. If I'm DNA related to the other Jesse, then it could be a possibility.
It could also be a cousin, though, because in our family, the Morris family, they reuse so many of the same names, like from the brother. Even in the same generation, there were two brothers that had the exact same name. You had William B. and then you had William Rowland. Why? Why were there two Williams? You know what I mean? And it's like, can't you pick any other names? But then in the next generation, you have a lot of the same names as well. It makes it a nightmare to sort them apart. But even though they have the same names and they were born at the same time, but for some reason they thought it was a good idea to name all their children the same thing.
Audrey has.
Yes, I see.
Yeah, the reason I put my finger up here because I can't find my raise hand button.
That's okay. I see you, Audrey.
Yeah, but you know what? Being an African American, I would like to say that my second great grandfather, who they said was born in Blackwater, Surrey County, Virginia, he shows up on two census records in the 1870s. Okay, and then what I had understood was because, African American and, the slavery, and it was, moving them from Virginia going west through, and far as the census record, they have the little X with a zero with a circle around it. And that tells you who gave the information for that record that the census taker was taken down. So if you see an X or a circle with an X in it, that is the person that gave that information. Now, if they've been moved from one state to another state, and it's only a few months apart, that family that he left, say, in Virginia, could have been under the influence that he's coming back. And so they included him on the census record, but by the time he got to Mississippi and settled, there was no turning back. So he ended up on two census records.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about the X and the circle thing. That's good, but that's a good point. That's a good point.
Sarah.
Yeah.
On one of your previous there where you said you was undecided and you had warning, but yet you had 6 people down below, but you didn't have anything on them.
Right.
Weren't they also?
That's because on that
undecided about them also.
That's a great point. And the reason why I didn't have everyone with a warning in that particular tree is because I was sure about those relationships in relation to those people higher up. It was when you get higher up that things are speculative, because I was linking people that are higher up.
Yeah, but you were only speculative of one of the parents, not the other. And you put warning on one parent, but on the other parent you didn't put warning.
You're right.
For those children. How did you know that they were associated with the mother and not necessarily the father?
I did. Hold on. I'm going to show you. I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm going to show you my logic for why I did this the way I did this. Because you're asking a great question. So originally I had my ancestor, this Thomas Whitford, I had connected as like merged. This person was merged with my Thomas Whitford. Okay.
Well, no, so this is not the graph you had up.
Well, I had this up earlier because this is speculative.
Now, like right here, you have warning and this. Now, why isn't there? Now, you see, you have warning on those, but you don't have warning on these two.
I'm going to explain it. Hold on. So, like I was saying, a couple of years ago, when I first learned about the Cornwall connection and I started looking at this, I feel fairly certain that this Thomas Whitford is my ancestor. And so I had this as that Thomas Whitford, that other Thomas Whitford with the speculative sign on it. So then he would have had the speculative sign, but then this Thomas Whitford, the father, would have also had a speculative sign. The reason why none of these people had speculative signs was because these people really are all siblings of him. And the reason why I had a speculative sign on him was because we're talking in the direct line going back. So I'm thinking if people are looking at this and they're looking at that Whitford family name, they're looking at who Thomas Whitford's parents are. Well, the moment they see that this Thomas Whitford might not really be my Thomas's father, because I have some notes about there being speculation, they're going to know that whoever was married to this one is not, it might also not be the right mother. This is not the mother. This is a sister. I don't have a wife for this Thomas Whitford. But when you come up to the parents, I know that this Thomas's father is Robert, and then his wife definitely was Ursula Ware. But the reason why I have speculative on him is because this Robert was the father of this Thomas, but also this Whitford, this William Whitford, who I had also speculated about, because I had speculated that this William was the father of a William who also came to North Carolina and lived in Bath. And so the point was, I was trying to highlight the specific connections themselves that were speculative, because everything else about this tree is accurate. Everything else here is accurate. But the ones that have speculative, if you go to them, there's actually notes. And so if I come here to this one, I have comments on him. So it says everything about this individual is highly speculative. I have nothing to verify that Thomas Whitford of Cornwall is the father of Thomas Whitford of Craven County. DNA. So I don't even have that connection anymore. So this is in notes rather than comments. But with the other ones, I have notes or comments for those as well. So when people go to these, they'll see what is speculative about it. But
even though you've got the match with the guy who traces back to Cornwall, you're not able to connect that Thomas with the other Thomas. Well,
the reason why I had the person in Cornwall had a completely different last name, but he was born illegitimate. And that was late, that was in the 1800s. All that suggested to me was that our Whitfords likely came from Cornwall, which is also supported by the fact that Pascoe Whitford, who, if I look him up, the early Pascoe Whitford immigrant ancestor probably came from Cornwall, because Whitford was Pascoe is a huge Cornish name and Whitford is a huge Cornish name. And so Pascoe Whitford seems like a Cornish name. You know what I mean? And so I had put that this John Whitford was likely there's a John Whitford who was likely the father of this Pascoe. And this is based on someone else's research, Albert Allison. And I noted all of that in the comments here. So whenever I have anybody speculative, I explain what it's about. But that doesn't mean everything about that person is speculative. It just means that a certain aspect of the relationship is speculative. And so I'm trying to highlight that and say, hey, before you assume that this relationship is verified, look at this a little bit closer. And I have the comments so people can see what they are and judge for themselves.
May we download your warning graphic?
I'm happy to provide this and another one. Yeah, you're certainly welcome to take it.
I think that's a great idea to do, so that people, even to use that, even like on FamilySearch, where you can upload the photograph, that you're saying, this is,
This other one that I recently did is just this one that says speculative. I do not have direct proof that this ancestor belongs in this place on this tree. So that's it's also kind of wordy, but I have both of those. But when I said,
will you give those to Nancy so that she can give the rest of us?
I will
make the warning one. Warning.
Yeah. I'll actually include that, and I'm going to be putting a handout together because this is a lot of information.
Okay, very good.
And that way you'll have that. And also, I'm going to take this video, and I've recorded this tonight, and I know they're going to be distributing it, all of you. But I just want to go in and sort of hide. Probably, I need to make sure I don't have any email addresses in there from FamilyTree DNA or anything. I just want to make sure if there's any of that kind of information, I mask it. Because I haven't gotten permission from everybody in the matches to show all of that. And on a live like this, I feel okay about it. But in the video. I just want to make sure, but I will have a handout and I will make sure to include that other speculative graphic that said warning, because I'm happy. I would love it for people to be able to use that, and I'll make it in different colors, because that way, if you want it in hot pink or hot green, neon green or whatever, you can take your pick. I just picked this yellow because to me, this is just really, it's just really bright.
Like a caution sign. Does anybody else have any questions for Sarah?
Yeah, Sarah, do you have a YouTube channel?
I have a YouTube channel I have a few. I have one for cooking, which is called Old Time Knowledge. But then, which I just started that one so I could teach people how to make collards, because people don't know how to make collards. And anyway, but then I've got also East Carolina Roots YouTube channel.
I have a question. This is Kelly. Are the notes about the FamilySearch items going to be on the handout?
I do need to talk about that. This will be quick, y'all. This will be quick.
That could be a whole nother project.
That was supposed to be bonus information, and we got carried away with the.
Well, what we can do is ask you to come back for another time.
Well, I can do that, but I don't want, if people join specifically for that, this will just take a second. So on my East Carolina Roots site, this is a helpful little thing. On East Carolina Roots, and you all can still see my browser, right?
Yes.
Okay. If you look over in the side, there's this thing that says FamilySearch, direct links to Eastern North Carolina counties. Now, this same technique is going to work. It doesn't matter. It doesn't just have to be Eastern North Carolina, but for those of you with roots in Eastern North Carolina, this will be helpful. I'm going to pick on Beaufort County because they are such a disappointment that they have not put their deeds online. So Beaufort County, I'm going to click on. So I went ahead and I linked every county in North Carolina from the FamilySearch catalog to this page. So you can jump right to any county from here. So I'm going to come here, and this is going to take you into the online catalog for FamilySearch. Now you need to be signed in, because if you're not signed in, you're not going to be able to get very far. It's going to tell you that things are locked and you can't see them. But if you wanted to look at, for instance, deeds in Beaufort County, this pulls up all the different kinds of records for Beaufort County. They've got so many different things: church history, church records, divorce records. But I'm going to come to land and property. And the big one is the index to real estate conveyances, and then the deeds and mortgages. So if I click on this is going to take you to their catalog, and see how it shows those little keys. That's because it right now it thinks I'm not logged in. I'm gonna log in real quick. If I'm just going to do sign in, and it's going to immediately sign me in. So I'm going to just come here, and if I go to any of these for the index, it's just like if you went to the Register of Deeds office. They've got the Grantors Index, and pay attention to the years, because the first set is 1696 to 1917. Then the next set is 1917 to 1953. Same thing with the grantees. They've got the Grantees Index. Okay. So if you go to any of these, you just click on, I'm going to come here. I come from Edwards. And so if I come here, this is what I wanted to say as far as this being a tip to dig down into these archives, because these are a nightmare. When you look at this, it's like all this little microfilm, and how are you even going to find what you're looking for? So the first thing I do is I notice with a lot of these, especially the deeds, they were really smart. They would put the big letter at the beginning of each letter in the index. Okay. So if I know I want to look for Edwards, I'm going to keep scrolling down until I see a big E. And let's see. And this has 532 pages, it says. I'll eventually get to. Oh, there's a letter. Let's see, which one is that? There it is. There's E. All right, so I can just come here to E, and then so that immediately gets me into the letter E. And so then I'm going to look for Edwards, and it says page 29. Okay, well, so if I want to get my bearings about where I am, this is one, but these are not necessarily just 1, 2, 3, because with the deed books, there might be multiple pages of 1, multiple pages of 2, and so on and so forth. So if I'm looking for 29, then I know that I need to be looking for at least let's just say 30 pages out from that. because this is the 29 pages from this page. We're going to say 30 pages. Each of these rows is 10. Right now it is, because I've got it one. I'm pointing at my screen like you can see, but it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I will literally just go from, okay, so that's the index page right here. And then I'm going to say, I'm counting out 30. So I'm going to say 10, 20, 30, but then I'm going to back up a little bit. So then we'll see where this gets us. Is this going to put us at page 29? Well, this puts us right at 30. So this is good. So then I can just back right up to the beginning, and there's page 29. And I might back up one more time just to make sure I've got it at the beginning of Edwards. Okay. So then, yep, here's the beginning of Edwards. So now this gets me right to where I want to go in this index. This is the Grand Tours index for Edwards. Then, of course, I can download these pages, print them out if I want to, or I can just make notes. A lot of times I'll print these pages out and then highlight the ones I want to get. And so then once you know the book and the page you're looking for and you remember that. So if I wanted to look at, I'm going to come down here and say, okay, Isaac Edwards to Thomas Arnold. I heard somebody mention they come from an Arnold, so I'm going to do this. So that's in book 8 and page 86. I'm just going to go back, and then I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to find book 8, which is, this is Deeds and Mortgages, volume 7 and 8. You might have to go to the end of one. And I'm going to do the same thing. This is going to tell me with the big, page here, it's book 7, but I'm just going to scroll down until I find book 8. And then I'm going to use that same method of counting pages, except for in this case, there's 2 pages on every page, because you might be able to see that. I don't know, it's really small, but like with these pages, it's 2 pages per page. So this is one where we know we're going to have to adjust it for that. So here's book 8. What page number was that? 76, I think. So 10, 20, oh, so this is actually 20, 40, 60. This would be 80, but let me come here and see if I'm getting close to 76. Oh boy, and it's hard to read them. They're really, really kind of smudged, and sometimes they get dark in the corners. 79, 78, and here we are, 76. And so this gets me right to where I need to go. This indenture made between, and then it says, this is the deed that I would be looking for right here. Yeah. And so that gets you quicker to where you want to go with FamilySearch. So no matter which one you're wanting to look at, some of them don't have the index where you've got the exact page numbers to go to. But if you do have the exact page numbers that you want to go to, that is just a neat tip. Just pay attention to how many pages are in a page. Try to get it so you've got like 10 pages across in your browser, or 10, thumbnails across in your browser, and then just count that way to get where you're going.
These are unindexed records.
They're unindexed. Well, they have the index, but the index is like that separate part we just looked at.
Right. But I mean, they're unindexed by FamilySearch.
Right.
You want to understand now that they have digitized everything.
Hi, Sandy Hawkins.
They're going to work on, they said they have a plan that they're going where, to index these. So we'll have an index.
Yes. And I've also heard that the OCR, the optical character recognition technology, is getting better to where it is getting better at reading cursive now. Right. So how amazing will that be if it can get to the point where it's really able to read the cursive? And then we can just do a search, and yes, it might pull up things that might not be quite right, but it'll be a lot better than it is now. Anyway, that was the main thing that I was saying as far as digging down. So if you're wanting to look at any counties in Eastern North Carolina, using that quick links list might be helpful to you.
That's wonderful.
And then once you dive right into any of those counties, if it is something where it has an index, let's say an index like deed indexes or whatever, but it's not been indexed as far as for search, then this is just a quicker way to get to what you're wanting to look for. I just use that method as far as sort of just, like I say, counting the pages, just to drill down to where I want to go faster. And it just seems to be a little helpful.
So that the page that you link to the different counties, that will list everything in that county, like court minutes, everything.
Every single thing.
That FamilySearch has.
Right. So for Lenore County, I'm gonna click on Lenore because we know Lenore County is a hard county. Any of us who have people there, it's just hard to do research. But you know, whatever they have, this is what they have. You can click on any of these and it'll pull everything that they have up, and you can just click on any of these things. And you know, some of them are not going to probably have any kind of index. It's just going to be a matter of clicking through pages. Court records are a prime example of that. You know, any of these minute dockets, you literally just have to
go page by page.
Page by page, yes, tedious. And it's the same way with any of the court records. It seems like that's how they are. But yeah, but this list, I mean, I did this list for me because it's helpful for me. And I thought if it's helpful for me, this will be helpful for other people. But then once you get there, knowing how to really dig down into where you want to go. The Beaufort County deeds thing was huge to me because I'm so sad they don't have their registered deeds online like Craven, you know, or Pitt, because they have theirs, but we still need to be able to look at the stuff, you know, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank everybody. I don't want to keep everybody because we've got to have our little business meeting after this, but I do want to thank Sarah so much. Great information. This is wonderful. I have everybody's email except for Willie.
I didn't put mine in there, but if anybody wants my email address, it's just my name at outlook.com. Just Sarah, S-A-R-A, Whitford, W-H-I-T-F-O-R-D at outlook.com.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank y'all for inviting me. I was glad to be here.
I hope we can have you back again. So on some other subject.
Oh, I'll be glad to.
Thank y'all so much.